Welcome aboard, and thank you for tuning in to the Captain Podcast on our third episode. I'm the Captain, your host, and today we're joined by an airline pilot and expert.
Great to be here.
On this episode, we'll be discussing the critical skills and techniques every pilot needs to master when faced with unexpected and high-pressure scenarios. We'll break down the types of emergencies pilots might encounter, the training required to handle them, and strategies to stay calm and make the right decisions when it matters most. Stay tuned as we guide you through the essential elements of handling emergency situations for pilots. So as we embark on this journey into pilot decision-making under pressure, let's unpack a fascinating yet often overlooked aspect, the human mind in the cockpit, especially when faced with the utterly unexpected.
Right.
Emergencies, as we know, they don't send you a calendar invite. They burst into the cockpit without warning, triggering an immediate, powerful, physiological and mental reaction. It's that primal, whoa, what just happened moment.
Precisely. That sudden, involuntary reaction you're describing. That's what we call the startle effect.
Yum.
It's a sudden, intense jolt that can instantly throw off even the most seasoned, highly trained pilots. Picture this. You're cruising along, everything's routine, and then bang, without a millisecond's notice, an alarm blares, maybe an engine sputters, or a critical instrument panel just goes dark.
Yeah.
In that instant, your body responds before your conscious mind even catches up. Under that sudden, overwhelming stress, all those meticulously practiced procedures, the ones drilled relentlessly in simulators, can, well, astonishingly, they can just evaporate.
Really? Just vanish.
They can. Your brain's rational processing takes a back seat, and you're left with hasty, often intuitive reactions that are, more often than not, incorrect. The real insight here isn't just that pilots get surprised, it's that this surprise is a kind of primal hijacking of the brain's rational circuits.
A hijacking, wow.
Yeah. So the very first challenge for any pilot in an emergency is to reclaim control of their own mind.
That's a powerful way to put it, a primal hijacking. So it's not just a fleeting moment of surprise, it's something that can actively lead you down a dangerous path if you haven't prepared for that specific cognitive disruption.
Exactly. You've got it.
Can you give us an example of how this plays out in a real-world scenario, something concrete?
Certainly. The Air France 447 disaster in 2009, it remains one of the most poignant and, frankly, tragic examples of the startle effect and its devastating consequences.
Right, I remember that one. Over the Atlantic.
That's the one. The Airbus A330 was cruising at night, everything nominal, when a transient loss of airspeed data, basically, the pitot tubes iced over, startled the pilot flying.
Okay, so just a temporary sensor issue.
Right, temporary. And the aircraft was actually trimmed for a perfectly safe pitch attitude at that moment.
Okay.
But instead of maintaining that state, or even just assessing the situation for a second, the pilot overreacted. An immediate, rapid, and sustained nose-up input.
Nose up. With unreliable airspeed.
Nose up. Tragically, that initiated an aerodynamic stall. And what's even more critical from a human factors perspective is that the other pilot in the cockpit, also caught completely off guard by the sudden anomaly, didn't immediately recognize the incorrect input or effectively intervene.
So a breakdown in cross-checking too.
A profound lack of immediate cross-checking and a coherent, coordinated response. It meant the aircraft, despite having perfectly functional engines, departed controlled flight and remained stalled. All the way down.
Chilling.
It highlights how that initial startle can just override conscious, logical decision-making, leading to actions that, in hindsight seem irrational. But in the moment, they were a product of that powerful, unexpected jolt, maybe exacerbated by a lack of familiarity with high-altitude stalls back then.
That's an absolutely chilling reminder of how quickly things can go sideways
Yeah.
and how human reaction is paramount. So if that's the baseline human response, how on earth do pilots prepare their minds for such a powerful jolt? How do you, inoculate yourself against something so fundamentally human as panic?
Yeah. It's a foundational question, really, and the answer is rooted in extensive, repetitive mental conditioning. The goal isn't to eliminate the shock entirely. That's a natural physiological response to a sudden threat, right?
Yeah.
Instead, it's about shortening that initial freeze period as much as possible and quickly transitioning into a structured, trained response.
Okay, so minimize the deer in headlights moment.
Exactly. Pilots achieve this through deliberate and sometimes kind of unconventional techniques like chair flying.
Chair flying, like pretending in an office chair.
Sort of. But it isn't just daydreaming, it's mentally rehearsing entire emergency scenarios with vivid detail, visualizing every alarm, every checklist item, every control input, even the feel of the aircraft. Think of it as building neural pathways for crisis management without ever leaving the ground.
Huh. Interesting.
And of course, there's rigorous simulator practice that's as close to real life as you can get without actual danger. These methods are, in essence, a form of cognitive stress inoculation.
So it's like building psychological muscle memory, but for your brain, right? Training your brain to skip the panic and go straight to the trained response.
Precisely. That's a great way to put it. This mental conditioning significantly reduces the duration and impact of that initial freeze period, allowing for timely and appropriate action. Regulations, for instance, mandate that practicing various failures helps pilots overcome natural human tendencies like denial.
That this can't be happening feeling.
Exactly that. Or delay, where you might tell yourself, oh, maybe it's just a faulty gauge, I'll wait and see. The overarching goal is to cultivate a mindset of expecting the unexpected.
Okay.
If you vividly visualized, say, an engine flame out at 400 feet right after takeoff or a rapid depressurization at 35,000 feet, you are far less likely to be paralyzed or overly startled when it actually occurs. It's about proactive planning and training for those unwelcome surprises, so your first reaction is measured, professional, efficient, not a panic scramble.
That sounds incredibly rigorous.
Uh-huh.
But what about in the very moment, when you're already in the thick of it and your heart is pounding? How do you manage that immediate stress response when the unexpected has already hit?
That's where some very practical, almost counterintuitive strategies come into play. Simple physical techniques can be incredibly effective.
Like what?
Sometimes it's as simple as taking a conscious, deep breath. Just that brief moment of intentional respiration can help disrupt the physiological stress response and recenter your focus.
Breathe. Okay.
Or quickly reviewing a mental checklist. A pre-planned sequence of immediate critical actions can also help bring your focus back to the task at hand. And there's an old aviator's adage, wind your watch.
Wind your watch. What does that mean?
It's metaphorical, obviously. It's a reminder to take a brief moment, if time truly permits, to just assess the situation rather than impulsively yanking controls or pushing buttons. It's a deliberate pause designed to prevent those hasty, uncalculated moves that could inadvertently worsen the situation.
So a calculated, almost Zen-like pause rather than a paralysis. That's fascinating.
Exactly. And beyond these immediate techniques, the ultimate fallback is your training and your fundamental knowledge of the aircraft systems.
Right. The basics.
A pilot with strong fundamentals and a deep, intuitive understanding of their aircraft systems will trust their instruments and their practice procedures over a gut feeling of panic. The right stuff for a pilot under pressure, as the FAA safety team emphasizes, isn't just courage. It includes disciplined planning, comprehensive systems knowledge, and relentless practice.
Confidence through competence.
That's it. All of these build an unshakable confidence in your ability to perform. While you can't eliminate the initial shock of an engine fire warning or a sudden decompression alarm, you absolutely can train your mind to move past that jolt quickly, focus intently on the problem, and get to work effectively. It's about being in control of your reactions, even when the situation feels entirely out of control. Shifting from surprise to purposeful action.
That's a profound thought. True mental readiness is foundational. It sounds like a personal battle, a fight within the cockpit to master your own response. But here's the thing. Aviation isn't a solo sport, is it? Especially in a crisis.
Absolutely not.
That shared challenge in the cockpit brings us directly to the incredible power of crew resource management, or CRM. It's about the fact that no pilot, particularly in an emergency, truly flies alone.
You've just articulated one of the most critical evolutions in aviation safety over the last, say, 5 decades. CRM is far more than just a buzzword or some feel-good corporate jargon, as some might mistakenly think.
Yeah, it can sound a bit like that sometime.
It can, but it's really a practical, tangible set of teamwork skills, encompassing crystal clear communication, vigilant mutual monitoring between crew members, efficient workload distribution, and crucially, disciplined assertiveness.
Assertiveness, that's key.
It is. And history, with its unfortunately many tragic lessons, has proven, time and again, that effective CRM can be the decisive factor between a well-managed emergency and a catastrophic outcome. It's the difference between synergy and chaos.
I often think of the United 232 accident in Sioux City when we talk about CRM. That seems like a gold standard example, doesn't it?
It absolutely is, and it's a cornerstone case study in almost every CRM course. The DC-10 hydraulic failure in 1989, it left the aircraft essentially without primary flight controls.
Unthinkable, really.
Almost. What's truly astonishing about it is how the captain, first officer, and even an off-duty flight instructor who happened to be on board improvised as a truly cohesive, agile team to steer a jet that was, by all accounts, near unflyable.
How do they even do that?
Differential engine thrust, mainly. They openly traded ideas, continuously refined strategies for control, distributed tasks under immense pressure, literally saving many lives. It wasn't one person's heroism, it was the power of collective intelligence and disciplined collaboration. The post-accident mantra from that event became crystal clear. Synergy saves.
Synergy saves, I like that.
It's a powerful illustration of how diverse skills and perspectives, when properly harnessed, can overcome seemingly insurmountable odds.
So it's not just a historical anomaly. There are modern examples of this synergy at play too, right? These principles still hold up.
Indeed, and the principles were made as relevant as ever. Consider Qantas Flight 32 in 2010.
The A380 engine explosion.
That's the one. Their A380 suffered an uncontained engine explosion shortly after takeoff, which triggered a cascade of multiple system failures and over 50 automated alerts, essentially turning the cockpit into a Christmas tree of flashing lights and warnings.
Must have been overwhelming.
Immense. The crew explicitly credited synergy in action, the very essence of CRM, for their safe landing. The captain, recognizing the unprecedented workload, effectively tapped into the strengths of his entire team, including a second check captain and 2 additional pilots on board.
Wow, quite a team up there.
It was. They trusted each other's inputs, diligently cross-checked every piece of information, and methodically managed to avoid being overwhelmed by the sheer volume of data. It was a textbook demonstration of complex problem-solving and CRM under the most extreme pressure imaginable.
It's compelling to see CRM in action like that. But on the flip side, what happens when CRM breaks down? What are those common human factor pitfalls that CRM training is specifically designed to guard against?
Now we delve into the common traps that can ensnare even experienced crews. One classic pitfall is the authority gradient.
Authority gradient, meaning the difference in rank.
Exactly. It refers to the perceived difference in rank, experience, or even just personality between crew members. A steep authority gradient can make a junior first officer hesitant to speak up, even when they sense something is gravely wrong, out of a misplaced sense of deference.
That sounds dangerous.
It is. And unfortunately, this dynamic has played out in numerous accidents, not just in the distant past.
So it's still a very relevant and dangerous issue today.
Absolutely. Consider the Air India Express 812 crash in Mangalore in 2010. In that tragic event, a fatigued captain continued an unstable approach despite clear, albeit subtle, hints from the first officer that they should initiate a go-around.
And the first officer didn't push harder.
The first officer's deference to the captain's authority, combined with the captain's own tunnel vision and fatigue, tragically led to the aircraft overshooting the runway. Modern CRM training directly addresses this. It heavily emphasizes assertiveness training for both pilots.
Okay, so empowering the first officer.
Empowering them to call for a go-around or any safety action, regardless of rank or perceived seniority. A truly effective captain is trained to actively welcome input, even solicit it, from all crew members, fostering a cockpit environment where junior crew feel not just safe, but obligated to voice concerns.
Makes sense. The first officer isn't just a co-pilot.
Exactly. They're a crucial monitor, a vigilant backup, and an intellectual partner. In high-stress situations, 2 fully engaged sets of eyes and brains operating collaboratively are exponentially better than one operating in isolation.
That makes perfect sense. What other human factor traps do pilots need to be constantly vigilant about? Fixation, maybe.
That's another major one, yes. Fixation. Under immense stress, it's perilously easy to become fixated on a single flashing light, a particular alarm, or one specific system malfunction. And in doing so, completely lose situational awareness of the aircraft's fundamental state, its altitude, speed, trajectory.
Right, losing the big picture.
Precisely. We saw this with devastating clarity in the Eastern Airlines Flight 401 crash in 1972. The crew became so intensely fixated on a burnt-out landing gear indicator light that they didn't realize they were gradually descending into the Florida Everglades, tragically unnoticed until it was too late.
That's a chilling reminder of how insidious tunnel vision can be. So how do crews actively combat that kind of dangerous focus? What are the techniques?
Good CRM practice employs deliberate techniques to counteract fixation. Pilots are rigorously trained to verbalize their actions, their observations, their intentions, and to actively monitor each other's actions.
Talking it through helps.
It really does. They'll also periodically break the spell of fixation by asking, okay, big picture, are we still safe here? What's the aircraft doing? Where are we going? This forces a crucial reevaluation of the overall flight path and operational state.
A structured way to zoom out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is deeply ingrained in airline operations through the clear designation of pilot flying and pilot monitoring PM roles.
PF and PM. Okay.
The PF's primary job is always to aviate, keep the wings level, manage thrust, control pitch, fly the immediate path. The PM, on the other hand, is responsible for troubleshooting the system malfunctions, running the relevant checklists, managing communications, all while rigorously cross-checking the PF's actions and the aircraft's trajectory.
So clear division of labor.
Absolutely vital. It prevents both pilots from diving down the same rabbit hole of a system failure and neglecting the fundamental task of flying the aircraft safely. Effective crews also use standardized callouts like speed check or altitude.
Quick, sharp reminders.
Yes, these quick, assertive verbal cues are designed to snap attention back to priorities and deviations from the desired flight path. Many accidents, like Turkish Airlines Flight 1951 at Amsterdam, where the crew allowed airspeed to decay unnoticed. Well, they might have been averted with more assertive and timely callouts.
That's a lot of information to process and coordinate in an emergency, especially with alarms blaring. How do crews manage what must feel like an overwhelming flood of data, lights, and checklists?
That's where workload management, another critical CRM element, becomes paramount. In an emergency, you are indeed often deluged with sensory inputs, auditory alarms, flashing lights, electronic messages, a stack of checklists.
Yeah, it sounds like chaos.
It can feel like it.
Yeah.
But a well-trained crew immediately prioritizes tasks using a simple but incredibly powerful hierarchy. Aviate, navigate, communicate.
Aviate, navigate, communicate. Heard that one before.
It's fundamental. First and foremost, fly the airplane and maintain controlled flight. Only then, once stable, do you figure out where you need to go. And finally, once the first two are assured, you communicate your situation and needs to ATC or your company.
Makes sense. Fly first.
Crews are also expertly trained to delegate tasks effectively. This might involve strategically asking air traffic control for a holding pattern or a specific radar vector to buy invaluable time for troubleshooting.
Buying time.
Or, if it's functioning correctly and helps alleviate manual strain, engaging the autopilot to reduce manual flying workload, thereby freeing up crucial mental bandwidth for problem solving.
Use the tools available.
Exactly. And it means actively utilizing all available resources. This includes dispatch or operations via radio, ATC assistance, and even the cabin crew.
The cabin crew, too. How so?
Pilots sometimes forget that flight attendants can be crucial eyes and ears for external observations. For instance, confirming a fire in the cabin, or maybe the status of a failed landing gear from looking out a window. But they can only be an asset if you loop them in and brief them effectively.
Right. Communication is key there.
Which is why structured briefing tools like NITES, which we'll discuss shortly, are so vital. An informed cabin crew becomes an invaluable part of the solution rather than an additional source of confusion.
That's a brilliant point. It's not just about what's in the cockpit, but extending the team throughout the aircraft and beyond. So what about flexibility? Is there a danger of rigidly sticking to an original plan, even when it's clearly no longer working, or when conditions have fundamentally changed?
Absolutely, and that's what we call plan continuation bias. It's a known human factor killer in aviation.
Plan continuation bias.
Well,
Sounds stubborn.
It is. It's the insidious psychological tendency to rigidly stick to the original plan, no matter what, even when new information or changing conditions clearly suggest a different, safer course of action is needed.
Why does that happen?
Numerous incidents have shown that if a critical option like initiating a go-around during an unstable approach wasn't explicitly briefed or mentally prepared for, crews might actually, lack the mental resources to initiate it when it becomes vitally necessary. Factors like fatigue or get-there-itis.
Get-there-itis, that urge to just get it done.
Exactly. That strong, almost subconscious desire to reach the destination, it can subtly cloud judgment. Making a risky landing attempt seems somehow easier or more appealing than breaking off the approach and trying again, or diverting.
So how do you combat that cognitive stubbornness, that resistance to changing course when the situation demands it? How does CRM help?
The antidote lies in fostering a strong team culture, meticulously cultivated by CRM training, where anyone on the flight deck can voice without fear of reprisal, hey, this isn't working, let's execute Plan B.
Plan B needs to be an option.
Always. The crew then swiftly pivots, making the shift from one plan to another a deliberate professional decision rather than an ad hoc scramble. Good CRM ensures that contingency plans are pre-discussed and agreed upon during pre-flight briefings. For example, a standard approach briefing might explicitly include, if we're not stable by 1,000 feet, we go around. Period.
Setting the trigger point beforehand.
By making this clear and agreed upon beforehand, changing course in the moment doesn't feel like an affront to authority or a loss of face for the captain. Instead, it's simply the agreed professional course of action. It becomes a disciplined, team-based decision, not an individual burden, which significantly reduces the psychological barrier to changing plans when necessary, especially under immense pressure.
That seamless shift from individual mental preparedness to team coordination leads us perfectly into our next discussion. When all of those alarms are blaring and chaos threatens to take over, how do flight crews maintain a sense of order? Sounds like there's a pilot's playbook, right?
Yeah.
A highly structured way to make decisions when everything goes wrong.
You've precisely captured the essence. This is where structured decision-making models like FORDEC and DODAR become utterly indispensable.
FORDEC and DODAR. Okay, acronym time.
Exactly. These aren't just clever acronyms, they're essential frameworks that function like a pilot's emergency checklist for the situation itself. They meticulously force clarity, logic, and teamwork in moments that are inherently chaotic and information-saturated.
A checklist for thinking.
Kinda, yeah. When you're under extreme stress, having a well-defined, systematic formula to follow is an immense asset, a lifeline of logic, if you will, that helps you navigate complex problems when cognitive resources are at their lowest.
Okay, so let's break these down. Tell us about FORDEC first. What does that stand for?
FARET-DEA, which is favored by many European airlines and widely taught, stands for Facts, Options, Risks, and Benefits, Decision, Execution, and Check.
Facts, options, risks, decision, execution, check.
Got it. It was developed in the 1990s by Lufthansa and the German Aerospace Center, specifically to bring structure and logical progression to complex problem-solving in high-stakes environments like aviation. The process is remarkably systematic. First, you meticulously gather all the facts. What exactly is happening? What are the symptoms, alarms, readings, observations?
Just facts.
Then, as a team, you brainstorm all the plausible options. What can we actually do about this situation? This critical step actively prevents tunnel vision and ensures a comprehensive range of solutions are considered.
Okay, open it up.
Next, you thoroughly analyze the risks and benefits associated with each of those options, often discussing worst-case scenarios, best outcomes. It's a crucial step for a thorough, balanced assessment.
Weighing the pros and cons.
After that, you make a clear decision on the optimal course of action based on the analysis. Then comes execution, carrying out the plan with explicit, clear task assignments among the crew, ensuring no ambiguity. And finally, crucially, check the results. Did it work as intended? If not, you immediately cycle back through the process, reevaluating.
A continuous loop if needed.
Exactly.
And I've heard there's a special significance to the hyphen in 4DEC, something about a pause.
That's a subtle but profoundly important detail. The hyphen in 4DEC symbolically represents a deliberate, conscious pause between assessing risks and making the final decision.
A pause for thought.
It's a built-in moment for critical reflection, prompting the crew to ask, have we missed anything absolutely vital? Or are there any unforeseen consequences or second-order effects of this decision? In the intense, often disorienting fog of an emergency, that brief, intentional reflection can catch hasty errors, uncover overlooked data, and ultimately ensure a more robust and safer decision. It's an explicit command to slow down before committing.
Fascinating. So what about DODAR? Is it similar in philosophy? Sounds like another decision model.
DODAR is indeed quite similar, yeah. It's a 5-step model that's also widely used. For instance, it's a staple in British Airways training. It stands for Diagnose, Options, Decide, Assign, and Review.
Diagnose, options, decide, assign, review.
Often, an initial T for time is added, making it TDODAR, particularly for time-critical situations.
TDODAR. Time, diagnose.
Right. This model emphasizes a couple of practical points. First, diagnose. It forces the crew to clearly and unambiguously identify the problem. This might sound obvious, but in a crisis, crews can easily misdiagnose the root cause, fixating on symptoms rather than the underlying issue. DUDAR pushes for a clear, agreed-upon initial definition of the problem.
Nail down what's actually wrong.
Exactly.
And the T for time, that's about urgency, right? How much time do we have?
Precisely. TDODAR explicitly reminds crews to consider the time available at the very outset. Do you have minutes to hold, troubleshoot extensively, explore multiple options, or is an immediate diversion, emergency landing, or other rapid action required? That inherent time pressure significantly shapes how many options you can realistically consider and how quickly you need to act.
Makes sense. Time changes everything.
Then, like Fordes, comes options. Brainstorming and listing all plausible actions to avoid tunnel vision. Then, you collectively decide on the optimal course, assign tasks to ensure everyone knows their precise role in carrying it out, and finally, review the entire plan to ensure nothing major has been missed before execution.
These acronyms seem like they'd be incredibly helpful in real time, but how do they genuinely enhance crew resource management? How do they make the crew more than the sum of its parts, practically speaking?
That's one of their most powerful, almost transformative aspects. These models fundamentally compel both the pilot flying and the pilot monitoring to verbalize each step of the decision-making process.
Talk it out loud.
Exactly. This naturally involves both pilots actively and equally in the decision. The cockpit environment fundamentally shifts from one pilot handling it while the other watches to an actively cooperative intellectual mission where both are contributing their cognitive resources.
Shared thinking.
Yes. The benefits are numerous and profound. It actively prevents jumping to premature conclusions. It provides the co-pilot a built-in formal opportunity to voice concerns or offer alternative input because you're explicitly discussing options and risks together. And it even empowers the captain to change their mind based on valuable input without feeling like they're losing authority or being undermined.
Takes the pressure off one person.
Essentially, yeah. The decision-making becomes a shared mission, a collective burden, not a solo one. Many airlines standardize on one model, so everyone speaks the same structured language under stress. If your carrier trains DODAR, both pilots know that after diagnosing, you immediately move to brainstorming options, so the first officer might proactively start suggesting ideas. This prevents the chaos that could arise if one pilot was thinking foredeck and the other something else entirely. Standardization is key.
It sounds like a fantastic, almost foolproof system, but are these models always applicable in every emergency scenario? What if you truly don't have time to go through all those steps, like seconds count?
That's a crucial nuance, and it highlights that no mnemonic will magically solve every emergency, nor should it replace raw pilot judgment. There are indeed distinct limitations.
Okay.
For instance, if the situation demands split-second, immediate action, think of a severe wind shear escape maneuver, where you're seconds from impact, or an urgent ground proximity warning system pull-up warning.
Taking my time for a meeting, then.
Exactly. There's simply no time for a crew huddle or a step-by-step foredeck or DODAR review. In such extreme cases, you must react instantly, aviate and stabilize the aircraft first and foremost, and then analyze later. Rigidly adhering to a multi-step process in such a dire situation could actually be an obstacle to quick and obvious action, costing critical seconds that lead to disaster.
So they're more like servants to the pilot's judgment, not masters of it.
Yeah.
Tools, not rules.
Exactly. That's a perfect way to put it. Another potential pitfall is using the process just to justify a pre-made decision, essentially going through the motions to back up what you've already decided rather than genuinely exploring options.
Right, reverse engineering the justification.
And of course, not all knowledge fits neatly into an acronym. Gut feeling, pattern recognition, sheer experience, what we call the aviate instinct of a seasoned captain, might tell them something that's hard to articulate perfectly within an options and risks framework in the heat of the moment.
So experience still counts.
Immensely. So pilots are explicitly taught to use these models as powerful support tools as servants, not masters. If time is short or the correct action is obvious, you aviate and handle it with the immediate memory items. You can always formalize the decision steps and document them once the aircraft is stabilized and out of immediate danger. In practice, many crews employ scaled-down versions for time-critical moments. Aviate, stabilize, then maybe a quick mental DODAR or foredeck, just hitting the high points. Diagnose, decide, assign. It's about flexibility, adaptability, and ultimately common sense applied within a structured framework.
That makes perfect sense. Speaking of communication tools, how do pilots relay all this complex emergency information to the rest of the crew, like the flight attendants? They aren't in the cockpit, but definitely need to know what's happening, right?
That's where NIGHTS comes in another helpful acronym. It stands for Nature, Intention, Time, Special Instructions.
NIGHTS. Nature, intention, time, special instructions. Okay.
NITES is a crucial communication tool, typically used for briefing the cabin crew or sometimes other team members, like a relief pilot, about the emergency in a structured, concise, and utterly unambiguous way.
Keep it clear and simple.
Its primary purpose is to provide a succinct template that ensures all absolutely essential information is covered systematically during a high-stress briefing. It prevents rambling, forgotten details, or miscommunication. It's about getting everyone on the same page, quickly.
Can you give us an example of how that might sound in a real scenario? Like, what would the captain actually say?
Certainly. Imagine a captain presses the call button, the lead flight attendant comes to the cockpit door. The captain might give a NITES briefing, something like this. Okay, listen up. Nature of the problem. We've had a partial landing gear failure. The nose gear is not extended, in tension. We will be making an emergency landing back at the departure airport on runway 27, time. We expect to be on the ground in about 20 minutes. Special instructions. Expect a gear-up landing, so we will need a brace for impact command to be given by the cabin crew just prior to touchdown, and then a rapid evacuation is likely on the runway itself once we stop.
Wow, very direct.
And the cabin crew is then rigorously trained to repeat this briefing back to the pilots to confirm their understanding. Ensures no critical detail was missed.
That's incredibly clear and seems to prevent so much potential chaos. Gets everyone aligned.
It truly is. This method avoids a rambling or incomplete briefing. It ensures the cabin crew receives a clear, concise picture of exactly what's wrong, what the flight crew plans to do, how much time they have to prepare, and what specific actions they need to take.
Yeah, knowledge is power, especially then.
The value of NITES has been proven in countless incidents where a calm, structured briefing prevented chaos and confusion in the cabin. An informed cabin crew can then effectively brief passengers, prepare the cabin, assist the flight crew during an evacuation, rather than operating in the dark or, even worse, spreading misinformation. Many airlines even have NITES built directly into their emergency checklist, so it's a mandated, almost automatic step.
Just part of the process.
A simple yet profoundly powerful tool that aligns the mindset of every crew member on board. Everyone understands the game plan, which is absolutely crucial for coordinated, successful action in a crisis.
So these structured tools like foredeck, DODAR, and NITS are like mental guardrails, helping crews stay deliberate and coordinated even when external factors are speeding up around them. It's about bringing order to chaos, and that really shines through when you look at real-world scenarios. Now, we've talked a lot about the theory, the mental prep, the checklists, the communication frameworks, but let's bring this to life with some real-world examples. What profound lessons can we glean from actual moments of truth in the air where these principles were put to the ultimate test?
These real-world stories are incredibly powerful because they illustrate precisely how these theoretical principles translate into real-time performance under, well, unimaginable pressure sometimes. Let's start with some of the most inspiring triumphs of training and teamwork. The Miracle on the Hudson, U.S. Airways Flight 1549 in 2009.
Oh yeah, everyone knows that one. Incredible.
Truly a gold standard for emergency handling. When both engines of an Airbus A320 failed due to a bird strike at very low altitude after takeoff, Captain Sullenberger and First Officer Scholes had literally seconds to react and decide.
They truly exemplified aviating through the startle, didn't they? And then navigating to the least worst option, which happened to be a river.
Absolutely. Sullenberger immediately and calmly took control, famously stating, "my aircraft," and instinctively maintained the optimal glide speed by ear and feel, knowing the aircraft's performance intimately. Simultaneously, First Officer Skiles immediately began the dual-engine failure checklist, which, for an event like this, is almost entirely memory items.
Straight from training.
No time for nuanced analysis or a formal DODAR. They stuck to memory items and fundamental flying basics. They then, mutually, almost telepathically it seemed, decided that ditching in the Hudson River was the only viable option given their altitude and proximity to populated areas.
A huge call to make.
And throughout, their communication with air traffic control was crisp, concise, incredibly calm. We'll be in the Hudson, with Sullenberger's almost understated transmission. The ditching was executed with astonishing precision, and remarkably, every single one of the 155 souls on board survived.
Just amazing.
The key takeaways here are the unyielding focus on aviate, navigate, communicate. Both pilots stayed firmly in their lanes, one aviating, the other troubleshooting and communicating without tripping over each other. A gold standard example of professional airmanship under extreme, time-critical stress.
That's a story that still gives me chills. What other triumphs stand out as examples of these principles working perfectly, where teamwork saved the day?
Qantas Flight 32 in 2010 is another incredible case. It really demonstrates the power of methodical, unhurried decision-making under extreme stress.
That was the A380 again, right? The engine issue.
Yes, the Airbus A380 suffered that uncontained engine explosion shortly after takeoff from Singapore. It triggered an unprecedented cascade of system failures, over 50 ECAM alerts, turning the cockpit into that dizzying array of flashing lights and alarms we talked about.
Information overload, big time.
Monumental overload. The crew, led by Captain Richard de Crispiny, faced it head-on. They handled it by methodically prioritizing. First, aviate, maintain safe flight, climb to a safe altitude. Then, diagnose and manage. Crucially, they didn't rush to land. They entered a holding pattern for over an hour and a half to buy time.
An hour and a half? Wow.
That time allowed them to work through the extensive checklists, coordinate with ATC and their airline operations center, and even reduce landing weight by dumping fuel. This measured approach, made possible because they had a safe flight path and no immediate danger of, say, depressurization or uncontrolled fire, helped them catch critical items, like calculating a much higher than normal landing speed due to the extensive damage.
Taking the time paid off.
Their safe landing, with all passengers and crew unharmed, was a masterclass in crew resource management and workload management.
So it's a powerful example of slowing down to speed up in a crisis.
Yeah.
Taking that time to get it right.
Exactly. The takeaways are profoundly clear. When faced with multiple cascading failures, slow down the process if you possibly can to avoid making a bad situation worse. Prioritize the problems. Immediate threats like fire or flight control issues always come first, cabin comfort or minor advisories last, and communicate your plan clearly and continuously. The Qantas 32 crew kept ATC and the cabin crew thoroughly in the loop, ensuring everyone was primed for what was coming.
Eliminated uncertainty, prepared everyone. Good stuff.
Precisely.
And how about the Gimli glider? That's a truly legendary tale of improvisation and ingenuity, isn't it? Sounds almost like something out of a movie.
Air Canada Flight 143, the Gimli glider in 1983, is indeed legendary for its sheer improvisation. A Boeing 767 ran out of fuel at cruising altitude.
Ran out of fuel. How does that happen?
A fueling miscalculation, a mix-up between kilograms and pounds during refueling, a nightmare scenario that left both engines flamed out.
Wow, so a giant glider.
Exactly. The crew, under Captain Robert Pearson and First Officer Maurice Quintal, found themselves piloting this massive engineless glider. They somehow glided the jet to a closed airfield, which happened to be a former military base with a drag strip, and managed a dead stick landing with no power.
Unbelievable skill.
Pure, quick thinking, and excellent use of all available resources. They used a gravity drop of the ram air turbine for limited emergency power, and incredibly, First Officer Quintal happened to be an experienced glider pilot.
No way. What are the chances?
Right. He leveraged those unique skills to accurately calculate glide range and even perform a precise flare with no engine thrust. Meanwhile, the crew coordinated effectively with ATC and even with the cabin crew and passengers who helped spot the runway.
Teamwork extending beyond the cockpit again.
It's a prime example of creativity under pressure, drawing on every bit of knowledge and help available, even unexpected ones. The CRM here extended far beyond the cockpit. The Gimli glider teaches the value of staying calm, thinking outside the box, and working together beyond normal hierarchies when the situation demands truly extraordinary solutions.
These stories of triumph are incredibly inspiring, showing pilots at their best. But as you mentioned earlier with Air France 447, sometimes things go tragically wrong due to human factors. Let's delve into the profound cost of miscommunication and fixation, which are equally critical lessons, unfortunately.
Indeed. Air France 447, as we discussed regarding the startle effect, is also a profound lesson in why CRM and fundamental aircraft understanding are absolutely paramount. Beyond the initial startle leading to incorrect control inputs, the tragedy starkly highlighted a devastating breakdown in crew resource management.
Right, the two first officers.
Yes. With the captain out of the cockpit on a rest break, the two first officers failed to communicate effectively as the crisis unfolded. One was pulling full backstick, consistently putting the aircraft into a stall, while the other at one point was simply unaware of this critical control input, asking, "What's happening? What are you doing?"
Just total lack of shared understanding.
This ambiguity, this profound lack of shared mental model and teamwork, meant they never formed a coherent, unified response to the loss of airspeed data. Compounding this, neither pilot had recent robust training in high-altitude stall recovery, a critical gap the industry immediately recognized and acted upon.
A painful lesson learned there.
The lesson for all pilots is chillingly clear. Roles, intentions, and critical information must be crystal clear under duress. If something doesn't make sense, conflicting instruments, unexpected aircraft response, you must verbalize it, challenge it, cross-check basic parameters like attitude and power together as a team. Since AF 447, airlines have significantly enhanced manual flying proficiency and upset recovery training.
So crews are better prepared now.
Much better. It's a stark reminder that technology, while incredibly capable, can fail you. And when it does, basic stick and rudder flying skills and crew coordination become your absolute lifeline.
Then what about British Airways Flight 38? That's another powerful one about basic airmanship prevailing, isn't it? Landing short at Heathrow.
British Airways Flight 38 in 2008 is a fantastic, almost cinematic example of the principle. Fly the airplane to the very end, even without power.
What happened there?
This was a Boeing 777 approaching Heathrow when both engines lost power at low altitude due to fuel icing, a previously unknown issue for this aircraft type at the time.
Both engines gone again.
Yes. The pilots, Captain Peter Burkill and First Officer John Coward, instantly became glider pilots. They maintained incredible composure, promptly lowered the nose to preserve airspeed, and configured the aircraft for landing as best as possible, even with critical systems degraded.
Managed to glide it in.
They just missed the runway threshold by a few hundred feet, but the impact was entirely survivable. Remarkably, no fatalities among the 152 people on board. One key reason for this remarkable outcome was the pilots' laser focus on aviate. They didn't waste precious seconds troubleshooting an already obvious problem, the complete lack of engine power.
Fly first.
They flew the aircraft controllably all the way to touchdown. The lesson is profound. In some emergencies, there is simply no time for diagnostics. You must immediately trust your stick and rudder instincts and prioritize flying the aircraft first and foremost. This incident also spurred significant design changes in engine fuel systems to prevent similar icing issues.
So good flying save a day, and it led to improvements.
Exactly. The crew's cool handling truly turned what could have been a catastrophe into a powerful story of survival.
These real-world examples really drive home the point that crew actions, or unfortunately inactions, often dictate the outcomes more than the emergency itself. Pilots may not choose the hand they're dealt, but they absolutely choose how to react, and the results speak for themselves. This brings us to a fundamental understanding in aviation, that many of the regulations and standard procedures we have today are often, well, written in the blood of victims. It's a blunt, even stark way to put it.
It is, but it's true.
But it means that nearly every rule in the books has a deeply personal, often tragic story behind it, rooted in an accident or incident that taught us a hard, sometimes brutal, lesson. Understanding this lineage helps us truly appreciate why things are done a certain way and why these procedures are so rigorously followed.
That's a crucial point. It's not about morbid fascination. It's about deeply understanding the historical context and the immense human cost behind the seemingly abstract rules, and why we rigorously train for certain scenarios over and over. These accidents, despite their tragedy, become the unseen architects of aviation safety. They force us to learn, adapt, and evolve.
Let's delve into some of those key regulatory evolutions. Where did mandatory crew resource management (CRM) training, which we just discussed is so vital, truly come from? It wasn't always standard, was it?
No, definitely not. CRM training, as we explored, is now universally recognized as essential. But its mandatory implementation largely came as a direct, urgent response to a series of devastating crashes in the 1970s.
Which one specifically prompted it?
Incidents like United Airlines Flight 173 in 1978, where the crew got distracted by a landing gear issue and ran out of fuel. Eastern Airlines Flight 401 in 1972, where distraction led to controlled flight into terrain. And most famously, the catastrophic Tenerife collision in 1977.
The deadliest ever.
Exactly. All of these revealed deadly patterns of poor teamwork. Captains failing to listen to their crewmates, distractions leading to a profound loss of situational awareness, and a dangerous lack of assertiveness from junior pilots who sensed problems but felt unable to speak up.
So a clear pattern emerged.
A very clear, tragic pattern. By the early 1980s, regulators like the FAA and airlines themselves began implementing mandatory CRM training to directly address these insidious human factors. The FAA, for example, required all Part 121 commercial carriers to establish comprehensive CRM programs, making it an integral, non-negotiable part of pilot training.
So it wasn't just a cultural shift. It fundamentally transformed the cockpit environment and approach to safety. Became regulation.
Profoundly. It systematically shifted the culture from the old hierarchical captain is king attitude to a truly collaborative environment where every voice matters. It's no exaggeration to say that CRM has prevented countless accidents that we'll never hear about precisely because they didn't happen.
The accidents that didn't happen.
Every time pilots brief together, actively cross-monitor, or review CRM case studies and training, it's a direct result of those past accidents and the hard lessons learned. It's a stark reminder that when CRM breaks down, when the human element fails to collaborate effectively, airplanes can and do break too.
What about systems that warn pilots about terrain? Ground proximity warning systems, GPWS, and later TIGAIS. Where did those come from? Is that a similar story?
Very similar. Before the 1970s, controlled flight into terrain, or CFI, was tragically the single leading cause of crashes globally.
CFIT, flying a perfectly good plane into the ground.
Exactly. Perfectly good airplanes under full pilot control simply flew into mountains, hills, or even water due to disorientation, navigation errors, or misreading altimeters. Iconic examples include the 1974 TWA Flight 707 crash in Virginia, descending below safe minimum altitudes into terrain. In response to these preventable tragedies, the first GPWS units were urgently developed in the 1970s.
Okay, the tech started then.
By the late 70s and 80s, regulators mandated GPWS on large airliners, and later the more sophisticated enhanced GPWS or TAWS, terrain awareness and warning systems, became standard by the late 90s.
And the impact was truly significant, wasn't it? Made a huge difference.
Dramatic doesn't even begin to cover it. Sea-fight accidents plummeted worldwide once TAWS became standard equipment, and pilots were rigorously trained to respond to its warnings. We now take for granted that a loud, unambiguous voice proclaiming, "Terrain pull-up P," will warn us in time if we're inadvertently descending towards rising ground.
That iconic warning.
The rule today is crystal clear. Any commercial airliner must have an active, functioning TOS Edge PWS. As pilots, the mandate is to trust it, respond immediately. It's literally there to save your life, but only if you respond promptly and correctly without hesitation. It directly underpins the classic priority: aviate. If you get a GPWS warning, your absolute priority is to execute the escape maneuver first. Sort out why later. No time to debate.
Mid-air collisions are, thankfully, rare, but when they do happen, they are catastrophic.
Right.
Did that lead to a specific safety system we now take for granted? TCS, maybe.
Absolutely. The horror of mid-air collisions, though infrequent, spurred rapid and decisive regulatory action. After incidents like PSA Flight 182 in 1978 over San Diego, and a particularly tragic one over Uberlingen, Germany in 2002 involving a passenger jet and a cargo plane.
I remember the Uberlingen crash, yeah.
The Traffic Collision Avoidance System, or TCS, became mandatory in most commercial aircraft. TCS provides pilots with a last resort set of climb or descend instructions, known as resolution advisories, RAs, to avoid other aircraft that pose a collision threat.
So it tells you what to do.
Yes, and a key procedural change that emerged from these accidents, especially Uberlingen, was an absolute non-negotiable rule. You must follow the TCAS resolution advisory, even if it directly conflicts with air traffic control instructions.
That's a pretty strong rule. TCS overrides ATC. It sounds counterintuitive to go against a human controller.
It is, and it's a testament to the hard lessons learned. In the 2002 Uberlingen mid-air collision, one crew tragically followed ATC's descent instruction instead of their TCS climb advisory, leading directly to the collision with the other jet that was following its TCS climb instruction.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
Now it's drilled into every pilot. In a conflict between TCS and ATC, TCS wins. That rule is embedded deeply into regulations and rigorously taught in simulators precisely because of those lives lost. Pilots are briefed. Follow the RA immediately. Coordinate with your colleague. No room for debate.
You mentioned Air France 447 earlier, leading to CRM insights. That tragedy, beyond highlighting the startle effect, also led to very specific training changes, didn't it? Something called UPRT.
Correct. Upset Prevention and Recovery Training, or UPRT. It's a very recent and arguably one of the most critical evolutions in pilot training, largely driven by AF 447 and other incidents like Colgan Air 3407 in 2009, Turkish 1951, AirAsia 8501.
A cluster of incidents highlighting a gap.
Exactly. AF 447 in particular shockingly underscored that even highly experienced pilots could mishandle an aerodynamic stall at high altitude, partly because many had never been properly trained beyond very basic low-altitude simulator scenarios. Regulators worldwide responded by requiring robust UPR2.
So mandatory upset training now.
By 2019, both EASA in Europe and the FAA mandated that airline pilots undergo comprehensive training, including exposure to and recovery from high-altitude stalls, extreme unusual attitudes using specific, standardized recovery techniques. Simulators were massively upgraded to better model extreme aerodynamics, and training adjusted to teach modern recovery methods, like the crucial push-first technique to reduce angle of attack.
Push first, not pull. Counterintuitive sometimes.
Can be, but vital. It's about breaking the stall.
So today's pilots are specifically and extensively trained for those extreme high-stress scenarios that were once rare or entirely unpracticed. Much better prepared.
Exactly. Today's pilots are far more familiar with extreme unusual attitudes and upset recovery than those of a generation ago. While every pilot hopes to never face what the AF447 crew did, if they do, they're now significantly better prepared to recognize the onset of a stall and recover. This crucial regulation change came at the cost of 228 lives on AF447, a stark, somber reminder. So when pilots are sweating in the sim, practicing that nasty wake turbulence roll or high-altitude stall, they take it profoundly seriously. That training was forged in tragedy.
In-flight fires are arguably one of the most terrifying emergencies a pilot can face.
Yeah.
Did the procedures for those also evolve from accidents? Must have.
Absolutely. An in-flight fire or even just unidentifiable smoke is one of the most time-critical emergencies, with seconds truly counting. The 1998 Swiss Air Flight 111 crash off Nova Scotia proved this emphatically.
The MD-11, right.
That's the one. The crew detected smoke, initiated troubleshooting, even started dumping fuel. Unfortunately, a hidden electrical fire spread rapidly, uncontrollably, leading to widespread systems failure and loss of control before they could land. A critical factor was that industry checklists then didn't uniformly emphasize an immediate diversion and landing for unknown smoke or fire that couldn't be instantly identified and extinguished.
They tried to troubleshoot first.
They followed the procedures of the time. After Swiss Air 111, procedures were drastically changed across the board. Now, the memory item for any fire, smoke, or fumes of unknown origin is essentially ton oxygen masks, declare an emergency, and land at the nearest possible airport, no delaying, no fuel dumping if it delays landing. The philosophy completely shifted.
So the philosophy completely shifted to an uncompromising get on the ground now. Forget troubleshooting if you don't know the source.
Precisely. Get it on the ground. Regulators and manufacturers also pushed for major design changes. Improved material flammability standards, better circuit protection, advanced smoke detection in hidden areas. The mandate for today's crews is crystal clear. If you suspect an onboard fire or unidentifiable smoke you can't immediately locate and extinguish, you get on the ground now. Nothing is as risky as staying airborne with an uncontrolled fire. That shift is directly due to Swiss Air 111 and similar catastrophic fires like ValueJet 592. So when pilots run those intense smoke drills or see land immediately in the QRH, they know it's not optional. It's there because hard experience taught us seconds count.
And finally, engine-out procedures have seen significant refinements over the years. What's the story there, especially regarding identifying the correct engine to shut down? Seems obvious, but maybe not.
Over the years, accidents caused by mishandling engine failures have led to significant changes in both training and cockpit design. One key example is the British Midland Airways Flight 92 crash at Kegworth in 1989. The crew mistakenly shut down the wrong engine.
Oh no, shut down the good one.
Yes. They misidentified which engine was malfunctioning, turning a manageable situation into a catastrophic one. After that, airlines rigorously stressed the positive identification of failed engines. Nowadays, memory items include cross-checking multiple parameters, not just vibration or noise, but confirming via EGT, N1, N2, fuel flow exactly which engine is affected. Many airlines now require verbal confirmation between pilots before taking irreversible action like cutting fuel.
Like a double check.
Confirm left engine throttle, confirm. And the other pilot positively confirms to avoid the Kegworth mistake.
So almost a two-person rule for critical actions.
Yeah.
Makes sense under pressure.
Effectively, yes. Both Boeing and Airbus have incorporated this philosophy into designs. Critical switches often require both pilot's agreement, sometimes dual input. Auto-feathering and alerting systems also improved. Another update came after engine-out turn-back stall accidents. Training now strongly emphasizes sticking to V2 speed, maintaining proper pitch, rather than immediate return unless specific criteria met, ensuring control before maneuvering.
Refining the basics based on incidents.
These refinements came from studying many incidents where even experienced pilots made understandable errors under extreme pressure. So the next time a pilot practices engine cuts at V1 in the simulator, the intense emphasis on identifying, verifying, carefully acting. It's rooted in these hard-earned, sometimes tragic lessons. Every action carries the weight of history.
It's truly humbling to realize that knowing the why behind every procedure helps pilots not just comply with the rules, but genuinely respect them. It's more than compliance. It's paying respect to the crews who often inadvertently helped write those rules with their experiences. We've covered a lot about specific emergencies and the regulations that emerged, but what about the bigger picture? Is there a universal philosophy, a core approach to airmanship that applies to all pilots, regardless of whether they're flying a Boeing, an Airbus, or something else? Because for the layperson, they can seem like very different machines sometimes.
You've hit on a critical point, and yes, absolutely, no matter what type of aircraft you fly, be it a Boeing, an Airbus, an Embraer, whatever, the fundamentals of emergency handling are truly universal. Both major manufacturers, and indeed all aviation authorities worldwide, preach the exact same core doctrine: aviate, navigate, communicate.
There it is again, the big three.
And crucially, always in that specific order. This is the golden rule, the absolute foundation upon which all other emergency procedures are built.
So it really is about flying the airplane first, maintaining control no matter what's going on. That doesn't change, Boeing or Airbus.
Precisely. Fly the airplane first, maintain controlled flight above all else. Only then do you worry about navigation where you need to go. And finally, communicate your situation once the first two are assured. Even Airbus, often seen as having high automation, lists fly, navigate, communicate as the very first of its golden rules for pilots, printed right there in their manuals.
Okay, so it's fundamental for both.
Boeing training materials likewise hammer home maintaining aircraft control as paramount. This is exactly why memory items and quick reference actions exist across all types to handle the immediate flying part, stabilizing the flight path, before you dive into lengthy checklists or diagnostics. The pilot is still the core system.
What other common ground do Boeing and Airbus share in their fundamental approach to emergencies, beyond that golden rule? Teamwork, maybe?
Team coordination and role clarity, absolutely. The concept of one pilot flying, PF, and one pilot monitoring troubleshooting, PM, is foundational. Exists in every manufacturer's philosophy, every airline's SOPs.
PFPM is universal then?
Yes. Boeing typically refers to these roles explicitly in procedures, like PF continues to fly the aircraft, PM accomplishes the checklist. Airbus, through its ECAM system, inherently guides this, with the PM reading and acting on steps while PF oversees. Both philosophies strongly encourage the PF to call out deviations, and the PM to announce before executing irreversible actions, like shutting down an engine, getting explicit confirmation.
That confirm before action idea again.
It's a non-negotiable norm across all cockpits now. Avoids errors under stress.
And what about prioritization? Sorting through the chaos. That seems like it would be a universal principle too, regardless of aircraft type.
It absolutely is. Prioritization is another shared philosophy, a simple memory aid taught across the industry. First, handle memory-critical items fires, loss of control, GPWS warnings, then, when stable, use the checklist.
Deal with the biggest fire first.
Exactly. Prevents the trap of chasing a non-critical issue while a more urgent threat goes unchecked. For instance, both Airbus and Boeing have clear procedures. Engine fire. Deal with that immediately before worrying about a failed air conditioning pack. Unusual attitude. Correct that first, because no checklist matters if the plane departs controlled flight.
Makes sense.
Manufacturers might phrase it differently. Boeing, maintain control, analyze the situation, take proper action. Airbus, take action if things do not go as expected. But both emphasize this critical triage. Analysis comes after control. Don't just stare at warnings, do something effective.
And automation, which we hear so much about, do they have different philosophies on how much reliance to place on it in an emergency? Or does that also converge somewhat?
Well, there are slight philosophical nuances. Boeing traditionally gives pilots maybe more direct override authority. Airbus incorporates more flight envelope protections. But fundamentally, they both agree. Automation is a powerful tool, not a crutch or an infallible guardian.
Use it wisely.
Airbus's golden rule, #2, is use the appropriate level of automation at all times. Meaning, if it eases workload in an emergency, use it. But if it's part of the problem, behaving erratically, or you don't trust it, click it off and fly manually. Don't hesitate.
And Boeing.
Boeing, with its more direct control philosophy, also rigorously trains pilots to disengage automation and fly manually when required. For example, in an unreliable airspeed situation, both Boeing and Airbus methods align. Revert to basic flying references, pitch and power. Maintain control manually.
So manual skills are still core for both.
Absolutely. As an experienced pilot, you know the core airmanship fundamentals carry over. The best pilots are masters of the automation, but equally masters of manual flight.
So it's not about one being inherently better than the other, but rather understanding how to leverage the technology and, crucially, when to become the primary system yourself. It truly sounds like the human element is still, and always will be, paramount.
Without a doubt. Crew mindset and priorities are universally taught, like the emphasis on avoiding distractions, maintaining a sterile cockpit during critical phases or emergencies, only essential talk permitted. In an emergency, irrelevant conversation disappears. Both Boeing and Airbus cultures expect a business-like, laser-focused approach.
Focus is key.
And another crucial aspect both emphasize is maintaining robust situational awareness, knowing where you are, terrain, weather, traffic, even while handling the emergency. Many procedures explicitly include steps like advise ATC or consider weather for landing. It's easy to fixate solely on the failing system and forget you're over mountains or in a storm.
Keep the big picture.
Good training, regardless of manufacturer, always reminds you of that. As one pilot put it after an incident, no matter what airplane you're in, airmanship has to take over. That rings profoundly true. Company philosophies ultimately converge on expecting pilots to be pilots first, automation managers second.
So despite all the technological differences between these incredibly complex machines, the core expectations for a pilot facing an emergency remain remarkably similar. It boils down to the fundamentals.
Yes. To offer a light comparison, Airbus uses ECAM to help streamline fault handling the machine, help sequence the problems for the crew. But Airbus warns against becoming ECAM robots, use judgment, especially with multiple alarms like Qantas 32. Boeing, with more reliance on the Quick Reference Handbook, QRH, historically required more crew diagnosis, but newer Boeings also have electronic checklists. Boeing's philosophy was maybe fly, silence, confirm, act. Airbus isn't far off. Aviate, confirm via ECAN, do actions. Crucially, both thoroughly incorporate CRM delegating tasks, communicating intentions, verifying outcomes.
The core principles are the same.
In the end, the differences are minor nuances in how they achieve safety. The similarities are far greater in what they demand of a pilot. No matter what you fly, the industry expects the same core response. Maintain control, use your crew and resources, follow procedure, exercise sound judgment. The airplane's name on the fuselage doesn't change that fundamental truth.
That's a truly powerful takeaway, and it really underscores the importance of continuous learning and adaptation in this profession, doesn't it? Never stop learning.
Absolutely. The best pilots adopt an almost humble stance toward emergencies. They acknowledge it can happen to them regardless of experience, and they continuously glean lessons from others' experiences. Formal reports, safety briefings, hangar talk.
Stay curious, stay humble.
This proactive mindset ensures that when that challenging day inevitably comes, and it will, in some form, for every pilot, they won't be caught saying, I never imagined this could happen. Instead, they'll hopefully think, this is like that case I read about, or that sim scenario, here's what we need to do. And that crucial distinction, that deep-seated preparedness for the unexpected, can make all the difference in the world between a routine flight and, well, something else entirely.
Eventually, I cannot stress enough the importance of being thoroughly prepared, well-rested, and informed when it comes to handling emergency situations. A proficient pilot always anticipates the worst while hoping for the best. That wraps up today's episode of the Captain Podcast. I'm the Captain, and it's been a pleasure hosting an airline pilot and expert.
Thanks for having me. It was a great discussion.
Make sure you subscribe and like our content to support us. Comment below for suggestions. Thanks for listening. Fly safe, stay sharp, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Captain Podcast.